Hi, everybody. Welcome to the KC CHIROpulse Podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Perush, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Troy Fox. Good morning, Troy.
Good morning.
Hey, this whole Medicare maintenance thing, it comes up all the time. And you actually asked me a great question the other day. Where do you draw the line between acute care and maintenance care?
That was actually a question from my wife. She's like, how do you make that delineation? And I thought, what a great question.
It really is a great question.
Because we get a lot of docs that call us that don't know how to delineate between active and maintenance care.
Yeah. So let's just kind of walk through that a little bit, because there's actually several things to unpack there. So the first thing is, let's talk about how you delineate in your billing. So an acute care patient should have an AT modifier on the adjustment code, 9894041 or 42. If they're a maintenance patient, they should have the GA modifier on each of on those codes.
Right.
Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, how do you decide if they're AT or GA? Well, it's a simple question and it's a complex question all at the same time.
I flip a coin.
And that's one way to do it.
That is. It's probably not a very effective way if I don't want to be in trouble, but sometimes I like to ride the lightning. So I just flip a coin. Oh, yeah, you're still active care. Even though my notes don't support it. So yeah. Okay, so how do we make that determination?
So really you make that determination clinically. So if you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, which I hope everybody is when it comes to Medicare, actually when it comes to documentation of any type of patient, but if you're really dotting those I's and crossing those T's, then your documentation should guide you. Okay. So new patient comes in the door. And I know everybody does this. They immediately assume that they're an acute care patient, but are they?
They may not be.
They may not be. They may not be, because you've got to dig into the case a little bit to find out. Number one, how long has the condition been going on? Can the patient pin it to a specific incident or time when this happened? For example, a year and a half ago, I stepped down. I missed the bottom step on a step stool, getting something out of the cabinet, and that's when this started. Okay, so we've got a specific time in space when this began. Had they seen somebody else for it? Here's one thing a lot of docs miss. They've been to the chiropractor down the street this year and saw that doctor 20 times for the same condition. So are you tacking on to that? Yeah, you could be. So you've got to find out what other treatments the patient has had. What other doctors have they seen? What medications have they taken? You've got to really dive into the case a little bit, because
I always like to use this when you think about a patient. So a lot of times we think about, low back pain or neck pain or mid back pain. I could go to something like maybe a drop foot and go, okay, would that be something that I might be able to functionally improve? Well, maybe if there's a lumbar problem there, let's use a different one. I'm blind in one eye. Can you functionally improve my blindness in one eye? There's maybe a 1 in a million chance that there's something going on in my spine that maybe you could, but realistic chances of my blindness, especially since it got poked out with the stick and there's no eye there. Okay, let's go even deeper. I got my eye poked out with the stick, and I come to you and I say, can you functionally improve me? If you can, I'd like to be on active Medicare. Am I an active Medicare patient or no? Is anything you're going to do for me, if you rub some cream around my eye, is that prophylactic? It's prophylactic. That's how I look at it. You have to almost look at it as a different condition, because I think sometimes we try to put everything in the chiropractic box. And I get it, guys and gals. There are times that we do some really, really cool stuff. And sometimes we get unexpected, really cool outcomes with patients. Hey, my acid reflux went away. Hey, I've been dizzy for years, and I always want to say, are you sure it wasn't ditzy or is it dizzy? But either way, I'm glad you got better. But there are things that we help, but there are also sometimes that we have to look at this from a functional improvement standpoint. So I like to use that extreme example, because we look at patients when they come through the door, and sometimes, like you said, and I like this, we cut it off right when they walk in the door. We don't even look at past history and the chiropractor that saw them down the street X number of times.
Yeah.
And you've got to look at that. So
you have to, and you need to request those records too. Yeah. And I know sometimes we get a little leery about requesting the records from the doctor down the street. You need to request those records, period. End of story. Because you need to see what happened up to this point. So I'm going to back up here for just a second, because you just took a 50-pound sledgehammer and crushed the nail when you said functional improvement. Okay, so here's the other thing we have to know. Medicare does not look at us as pain management. They look at us as functional improvement doctors.
What?
Right? Right?
I'm an chiropractor. What are you talking about? I had to do functional improvement. They look at me. That's what chiropractic care is designed for in the Medicare system, is for functional improvement. So we need to be focusing in on function. Okay. Patient has pain. All right. That's part of your notes. It's part of your record keeping. It gives an indication of the severity of the problem potentially, or the relationship to onset maybe. But more importantly, how is the patient affected by this condition? Okay. So how do we find that? It's really simple, you guys. I almost don't even want to say it. It's so simple. All right. I'm going to tell you. This is my nugget for the day. Outcome assessment questionnaires. Now, half of you listening to this just fell out of your chair or about wrecked the car, because no patient likes filling those out, and staff just cringes when they have to hand it to a patient, because every patient complains, oh gosh, I got to fill this thing out. This thing, I don't know how to answer this. I'm telling you, those outcome assessment questionnaires should be the gold standard when it comes to function. Okay. And do us a favor when you do those outcome assessments. Make sure that you have a modified outcome assessment for your Medicare patients, because they have a different set of ADLs than I do at 28 years old.
Oh, wait a minute.
So, 28. How about that? Well, okay, I'm a little older than 28, but even at 29. Yeah.
There you go. That's closer.
but as I was looking through, I was actually looking through some of my outcome assessments yesterday, because every once in a while I like to go through as I start to get a little bit older. And I know I look like I'm in my 20s still, but as I start to get a little bit older, I go through those outcome assessments now, and I resemble more of those statements, but I was going through it to make sure that everything was there. Is there anything else that I could add that would help me really know where a patient is at? So I like to use a modified outcome assessment that really talks about those ADLs, that those folks that are of Medicare age. That's the one I give somebody that's Medicare age. And so make sure that you find an outcome assessment that actually is age appropriate.
That mimics. Yep. I agree.
Exactly.
And make sure you score it and share with the patient why that form is so important. This form is important because it shows that you have a 44% disability when it comes to your low back condition, for example. But from there, you've also got trackable goals. It's objectifiable. You can actually track it. Your first goal for the patient. Remember, you have to have goals in your records, or it's not an acute case. So your first goal may be to see a 20% improvement in your low back disability questionnaire in 2 weeks, maybe 40% in 4 weeks. And then how do you track it? You do progress exams, you guys. You've got to create medical necessity. Okay, so being acute when it comes to a Medicare patient, this really applies to anybody. Being acute is, can I prove that care is medically necessary? The two are intertwined with each other. Okay. So you've got this patient, you bring them in, you do an evaluation. And I see a lot of doctors say, well, Medicare doesn't pay for the evaluation, so I'm just going to not do it. No, we just did a major class on this, actually. You've got to understand what Medicare documentation rules are. And the whole point of documentation is not just writing down what happened or what the patient said or what you did. It's the pathway to get you to your diagnosis and medical necessity. The only way you can do that is by an exam. So you have to do an exam. It by virtue of the Medicare laws, the CMS laws, rules, you have to do an exam. There's no way around it. And then you need to do follow-up exams along the way. Okay. And then eventually that Medicare patient is not going to see improvement anymore. And when they get to the point where there's no reasonable expectation for improvement, geez, there's another nugget. When there's no reasonable expectation for improvement, then on the next visit, should the patient come back in, or should you recommend they come back in?
Yeah.
Then it's likely going to be maintenance.
You said something really important there, and here's where a lot of docs get hung up. They go back to, we already talked about this. You are considered a functional expert, not a, hey, when am I out of pain doctor, right? Even though, unfortunately, a lot of us function that way in practice. And we go, how you feeling today? Oh, I'm feeling pretty good today. I don't have any pain, haven't had any pain for the last 3 days, but they're still walking with a limp, but they don't have any pain. And you go, oh, okay. And they go, and a lot of times if we allow a patient at that point when they're out of pain, what do they say? Well, I think I'll just see you here in a couple of weeks, or I'll see you in a month, or I'll call you when I hurt again. So they basically self-release themselves, because we're not directing care, because we don't have any kind of roadmap to success for that patient.
Right.
And so what happens is they walk around with that dysfunctional limp, which was the real problem to begin with, was the dysfunction, not the pain. And they walk away. I hate when I see that happen, but here's the point. If you don't have a roadmap and you're not doing re-exams and you're not doing outcome assessments, you never really know when you get that patient to a functional plateau. In other words, where you're not going to make that change. And that kind of goes back full circle all the way to the beginning of when we talked. That's the point where we now are moving that patient to maintenance or wellness care. Sometimes it's wellness because they're well. Sometimes it's maintenance because you're just trying to keep the function that you have created, but you are aware that you're not going to create any more functional improvement. That's why the exams are important. So if that makes a little better sense, that's actually like putting the puzzle pieces together when we do it that way, rather than what a lot of folks do is they're confused about how the Medicare rules work. They think as long as the patient's still in pain, they can still treat. And you and I talked about this before, the shell game that's been played in the past, where somebody comes in with low back pain, and when their low back pain gets about 80% better, they just change the diagnosis to a cervical diagnosis and keep treating. And here's the thing. They had a cervical problem too. It's not like they're doing it and the person has no discomfort. They have cervical and lumbar problems, but you're going about it all wrong. You need to treat it from a functional improvement standpoint, like you talked about. Once they get to that plateau, now they're on wellness. Let's be honest with our patients, and let's trust our patients enough that they appreciate the care that you're giving them enough that they're willing to pay for that care outside of Medicare. And I will tell you that a lot of patients are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we hear from doctors all the time, not our members, because our members are really good at moving patients over to Medicare patients over to maintenance and the Medicare patient paying for the care. But I hear a lot of doctors out there still having trouble with that. And that's a whole nother class, or podcast.
You really have to realize with Medicare patients, they have a very limited care window. This isn't a catch-all insurance to where you just, I think that's a lot of, and I get it, chiropractors, we have felt wronged by the system. We just talked about that this morning. Why can we not, why can we not drop out of Medicare, just see our patients for cash? Why is there this inclusion that we're stuck in? Why are we not paid for some of the services? We get it. We feel wrong just like you do. We're chiropractors. We have been wronged in the Medicare system for a long time. And I have a very strong opinion about that. And I know you do too.
Yeah, but here's
but you can't use that as a grudge when you're billing.
No, because the Medicare system we have for chiropractic care is simple.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think as far as insurance goes, and I know it's not insurance, federal entitlement, but as far as insurance, third-party reimbursement, I'll put it that way. As far as that goes, you couldn't have a more simple system to function in. Okay. Because they pay for care. There's no parameters on care. You just are under the onus of having to prove medical necessity. Will they pay for 24 visits if it's necessary? I get this question all the time. Will they pay for 30 visits if it's necessary? You may have to prove it. Somewhere in there, they may ask a question like, can you prove that this patient still needs care? And if you can, then you're probably fine. But if you're at visit 6 and there's no functional improvement left, and you're still billing Medicare because you're not to the magic 18, you may be putting yourself in jeopardy a little bit too. So all you have to do is just really understand the rules here. Okay. And so the rule is then when you get that functional improvement stabilized, and there's no reasonable expectation for functional improvement, then you're going to move the patient over to maintenance care. Okay. If the patient accepts maintenance care, you have to have this conversation before maintenance care begins, not after. If the patient accepts Medicare, then you've got to slide the ABN in front of them. And you have to realize the ABN is a legal document that can only be used by a Medicare provider. Okay. If you're not a Medicare provider, you have no legal way to use the ABN form. Okay. And I'm not going to touch that topic right now. I want to say, because that's a whole other conversation, but use the ABN correctly. The ABN's your friend, and make sure you're filling it out correctly. I still see doctors doing this wrong. You can get in trouble for having an inaccurate and incorrectly filled out ABN. Okay, so
go ahead. Let me ask you a quick question. Is it possible that when I have a patient walk through the door on day 1, that they could immediately be a patient that I would need to have sign an ABN?
It's possible if that's what your exam tells you.
Okay, what would I see in my exam that would tell me that the patient would want to sign an ABN? You and I talked about this earlier, but let's talk about that real quick. Just give me the Reader's Digest of what would happen there.
I'll give you a super simple example because this just happened not too long ago.
Okay.
Doctor retires from practice. Okay. Closes the practice, shifts patient files over to his buddy down the street. Okay. Patient comes in, Medicare patient. They were on Medicare maintenance for, I don't remember, 8 months, I think. No new condition, no new issue, no pain. They just want to continue care. The new doctor does an evaluation because that patient is new to them, does an evaluation, and starts billing Medicare because he has not seen the patient yet. That's wrong. Because knowing that patient had been on maintenance care and there's no change in condition, unless you can prove that the patient shouldn't have been on maintenance care, which I think would be pretty hard to do, you probably are just a continuation of care. Here's another example. If that patient comes in, they don't like the chiropractor they've been going to, but they went 20 times for this condition, and somehow you don't ask, and the patient isn't forthcoming about having gone to somebody else. To Medicare, you may be billing for care on top of those 20. If you don't know about those 20, what happened in those 20, and you can prove that a continuation of care deserves an AT modifier for acute care. Okay, so this is just where you got to be careful. This is where you just have to be on your toes with documentation. It's not hard. You just look at that Medicare patient in that example and say, hey, we've done our evaluation today. I've got the information I need from that, but I need your other doctor's records. So we're going to fill out a records request. We're going to send that. And as soon as we have them back, then I can begin care.
Yeah. And you may be in a situation where maybe somebody's been under active care with another doc, and you evaluate them and go, I don't think there's any functional improvement to be made. That's probably another unique situation.
Sure.
There are times when a patient walks through your front door, other than just continuation of care, where you may immediately be going from from an AT modifier to a GA modifier, just like that.
You could be. Yeah. You could be. So you just got to ask all these questions, and then you got to tie everything back to medical necessity, which relates back to functional improvement. So
which means you got to take notes, and so it's important that you have good notes. It's important that you have notes that are easy for you to get into and complete. If that should make sense, because the harder it is, the more we are inclined to do less than an adequate job, even though we may know a ton about that patient and what's going on with them. We don't get it documented. And if we don't get it documented, it didn't happen. Right.
Right.
Yeah. That's no
unfortunately, if it's not written down, it didn't happen.
Yep.
And I hear a lot of docs say, it's so hard to document a Medicare patient. No, it's not. It really isn't. And honestly, you should be documenting all your patients that way.
Yeah.
You should have a very thorough exam, very thorough history. But, go and read. And if you're one of our members listening to this, go watch the new Medicare class that we just did on Medicare documentation and what CMS's rules actually are. Yeah. We break it all down very, very simplistically, in a simple manner.
In a simple manner. Well, here's the problem. And I will say that I've been guilty of this until I had to start working with clients and I had to teach other people. There were times where I was like, I don't know, and I don't really want to know. Now, that's not a good way to be. Trust me. Learn from me. Now,
you would always ask me to handle that conversation.
Yeah, I didn't get in trouble for anything, but I'm like, I would sometimes at points in my practice bury my head in the sand and put my hands over my ears, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil kind of thing. The problem is we can't do that. Right. Medicare doesn't care that you stuck your head in the sand and put your hand over your ears.
Nope.
You couldn't see, you couldn't hear. I didn't know. Now, if you work just a little bit at doing the right thing, you'll actually find out that your note system will improve. You have a much better system. Like Dr. Perush said, if you do this with all your patients, that functional improvement is awesome. And it's a really great way for your patients to see where they're at as well. You can go, you were at point A, now you're at point B, or you're at point B, and we need to go farther. You can actually look and see. And functional improvement, I think, as a chiropractor, is way more important than, did I get you out of pain? Sure, I want you to be pain-free, but I want you to be functional, because the problem is if I just get you pain-free, 30 years from now, you're still going to have that lumbar spine problem. You're going to have all kinds of DJD. Maybe there's no disc space left. But if I get you functional and I keep you there, is there a better chance that maybe you'll retain that disc space and that function, and you won't go through as much arthritic change? I think that's a fair argument.
And that's why people will stay in maintenance care. When you tie it to pain, there's no emotional connection to pain. It's either on or it's off.
Right.
But when you talk about function, you're talking about restoring patients' lives. Yes. Oh my gosh, Dr. Fox, I can get down on the floor and play with my grandkids now. Thank you. When you restore people's lives, when you bring back function, this is the great thing in my mind about what we get to do is we help people get back to the things they love to do. And then we help them stay there. So if you've pulled some stuff out of this podcast today and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my notes are terrible, I'm not doing it right or whatever, just go to your compliance manual, document that you listen to this podcast and you're making the following changes, sign it, date it. And if you get audited, I'm not going to tell you this is going to keep the auditors completely off of you, but it does give you fodder to say, look, I'm trying to do the right thing. I didn't go back and alter my notes. I documented that I watched a class and I got some new information that I think is going to help my documentation better. They're going to smile at that. The auditors are going to smile at that. I'm not going to tell you it's going to keep you out of trouble, but it's going to make the audit process maybe a little bit smoother. At least we hope.
So what if I don't have a compliance manual?
There's podcast number 3 that came out of this. Maybe we'll dive into that next time.
Oh yeah. So
all right, everybody. I think we beat the Medicare maintenance rabbit to death here.
Pulp.
So
yeah,
bloody pulp. So, and hey, if you haven't already done this, go to catsconsultants.com, see what we're doing to help clients out there have better practices, more profitable practices, and most of all, your own life back. And make sure to download our PDF. It's on how to boost your annual practice revenue by $130,000 or more in 5 simple steps. And I'm telling you, these 5 simple things are so incredibly simple. You'll be like, how come I wasn't already doing this? So, Dr. Fox, thanks for joining us today. Thanks everybody out there listening to the KC CHIROpulse podcast, brought to you by Cats Consultants. We'll see you all next time.